Most men find out their wife is cheating through a text message or lipstick on a collar. I found out through a 27-page legal document that arrived on a Thursday afternoon while I was grading papers, divorce papers. Custody proposals, a settlement offer so clean and confident it must have taken weeks to prepare. She had accounted for everything: the house, the cars, the savings, my teacher's pension. Every dollar of a modest, middle-class life divided right down the middle. There was just one problem. She had no idea who she was actually married to. If you have ever watched someone underestimate you completely, subscribe. Because this story is going to show you exactly what that looks like when it falls apart. My name is Michael Chen. I am 47 years old. I teach high school history in Portland, Oregon. I drive a 2012 Honda Accord. I live in a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-of-the-road neighborhood. And until 6 weeks ago, I believed my wife Jennifer loved me for exactly who I appeared to be. Let me tell you about the life I chose, because that word matters. Chose. I grew up in Seattle. My father immigrated from Taiwan in the 1970s and built a small technology components company from nothing. By the time I was in college, that small company had become something considerably larger. When he passed away 12 years ago, he left me everything. The company was worth approximately $340 million. I was 35 years old, suddenly one of the wealthiest men in the Pacific Northwest that almost nobody had ever heard of. I made a decision that day that would define the next decade of my life. I did not want to be known for money. I did not want relationships built on wealth or status or expectation. I wanted something real. So I placed everything into an ironclad trust managed by a firm in San Francisco. I took a modest salary, enough to live comfortably, not extravagantly. I kept my father's name off everything public, and I became a high school history teacher because I had always loved history and because I wanted to build a life that looked exactly like what it was. Simple, honest, and deliberate. I met Jennifer 3 years after my father died. She was a dental hygienist. She had a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. She loved old movies and Sunday morning farmers markets. We dated for 2 years. I never told her about the trust or the company or the $340 million sitting in carefully managed accounts. I told myself I was protecting something pure. I told myself I was being careful. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be true in ways I had not anticipated. We married in a small ceremony at a vineyard in the Willamette Valley. 50 guests, handwritten vows. A reception that ended with dancing under string lights. Jennifer wore a dress she had found at a consignment shop. She cried during our first dance, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. We bought the house 6 months later. 3 bedrooms, aging roof, a backyard garden. Jennifer said she would start but never quite did. We had 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie, now 9 and 7. I coached their soccer teams. Jennifer worked part-time at a dental office downtown. We budgeted carefully. We drove used cars. We took vacations to the Oregon coast instead of Europe. For 9 years, it was exactly the life I had chosen. Quiet, real, grounded. Then Jennifer started working late on Thursdays. She had joined a book club, she said. A group of women from the dental office getting together to discuss novels and drink wine. I encouraged it. I thought it was good for her to have something outside our family routines. I made dinner for the girls on Thursdays, helped with homework, never once questioned why she came home smelling faintly of cologne that was definitely not wine. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. The girls were at school. I had a free period and had come home to prep for an afternoon lecture on the Civil War. I opened the envelope standing in my kitchen and read the first page twice because my brain could not process what my eyes were seeing. Jennifer Chen was filing for divorce. She was seeking primary custody of both daughters. She was requesting half of all marital assets, the house, and monthly spousal support. The papers cited irreconcilable differences and emotional distance. They had been signed and notarized 3 days earlier. I sat down at the kitchen table and read all 27 pages. The asset list was thorough. Our joint checking account, our modest savings, the house at current market value, my teacher's pension, my 2012 Honda, everything we owned together divided precisely down the middle, reasonable, legally sound. Based on a complete misunderstanding of reality, there was a handwritten note paper-clipped to the back page. She was sorry. She had tried to make it work. She hoped we could be civil for the girls. Her attorney was someone named Brian Morrison from Morrison & Associates, the same name on the letterhead. Brian Morrison. the man whose cologne she had been wearing home every Thursday for God knows how long. I did not call Jennifer. I did not rage or break anything or drive to her office. I sat at my kitchen table for approximately 45 minutes, completely still, thinking about 9 years of Thursday book clubs. Then I called my attorney. Not a divorce attorney, my trust attorney, a man named Robert Hang, who had managed my father's estate from San Francisco for the past 12 years. I told Robert I was being divorced. I told him Jennifer had no idea about the trust, the company, or any of it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked me one question. Did you want to continue protecting that information, or did you want to proceed with full disclosure? I thought about Emma and Sophie. I thought about 9 years of a life I had built deliberately. I thought about Thursday evenings and cologne that was not wine. I told Robert I wanted to wait. I wanted to see exactly how this would unfold. I wanted to understand what I was really dealing with before I made any decisions about what to reveal. Robert said he understood. He said he would prepare the documentation but would not file anything until I gave him explicit instructions. I thanked him and hung up. Jennifer came home that evening at her normal time. She walked into the kitchen where I was making pasta with the girls and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not quite guilt. More like resolve. She asked if we could talk after the girls went to bed. I said of course. We ate dinner like we had eaten 1,000 dinners before. Emma talked about her science project. Sophie complained about a boy who kept stealing her pencils. Jennifer passed the salad and refilled water glasses and played the part of a mother at a family dinner with the kind of performance that only comes from practice. After the girls were asleep, Jennifer sat across from me at the kitchen table. She said she knew I had received the papers. She was sorry for how I had found out. She said we had grown apart. That she still cared about me but was not in love with me anymore. That she wanted mediation. That Brian had recommended it. Brian, her attorney, said it so naturally. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I asked her one question. Is there someone else? She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then she said no. This was about us, about needing something different in her life. She said it with practiced sincerity. She was lying and we both knew it, and she did not care that I knew. I told her I would agree to mediation. I told her I wanted what was best for the girls. I told her we could work through this like adults. She looked relieved. She actually looked relieved. She said Brian had told her things could get ugly, but she had known I would not be that kind of person. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, I called my brother David, corporate attorney in Seattle. The only person outside of Robert Hang who knew the full scope of what our father had left behind. I told him everything. The divorce papers, the asset list, the Thursday book clubs, the attorney named Brian Morrison. David was quiet for a long time, then he started laughing. Not cruel laughter, the deep, exhausted laughter of a man who has just heard something so absurd it loops back around to being funny. He said Jennifer was about to have the worst day of her life and she had no idea it was coming. He said, let this play out exactly as she planned it. Go to mediation, be cooperative, be reasonable. Let her think she understands exactly what she's dividing in half. Then, at the precise right moment, let Robert Hang introduce himself. I agreed to mediation. I showed up to the first session at Morrison and Associates with a folder of our joint financial documents. Jennifer was already there with Brian Morrison, mid-40s, expensive suit, confident handshake, wedding ring conspicuously absent. He greeted me with professional courtesy and a slight condescension that suggested he had already decided I was going to be easy to manage. He was smooth, practiced. He talked about fair division and the girls' best interests and maintaining stability during a difficult transition. He proposed Jennifer keep the house. I take the car and half the savings. Spousal support based on my teaching salary. Everything looked generous while giving Jennifer exactly what she wanted. I agreed to almost everything. I asked for equal custody instead of primary. They agreed. I asked to keep my pension intact. Brian said that was fair. I watched them exchange small glances across the table, moments of satisfaction. They thought this was going exactly as planned. During the second session, Brian presented the final settlement. Everything divided, everything accounted for, assets totaling approximately $425,000. The house, the cars, the accounts, the pension. A comfortable middle-class life split precisely down the middle. Jennifer would receive roughly $285,000 in total value, including the house. Modest spousal support for 3 years, shared custody. Brian slid the document across the table with a pen. He said once we both signed, we could file with the court and complete this efficiently. He said he thought we had reached a fair agreement. Jennifer nodded. She looked at me with something between pity and relief. I picked up the pen. Then I set it down. I said I appreciated Brian's work, but I needed to make sure we had accounted for everything. I said I had asked my attorney to review the settlement, just to be thorough. Brian's expression shifted slightly. He asked if I had retained counsel. I said I had, just someone to look over the paperwork, nothing adversarial. He said that was fine but unnecessary. Everything was straightforward. I agreed. I said my attorney would be in touch. Jennifer asked why I needed an attorney if we had already agreed to everything. I told her I just wanted to make sure the girls were protected. She accepted that. Brian accepted that. They had no reason not to. Robert Hang called Brian Morrison's office the next day. He introduced himself as my legal counsel. He said he had reviewed the proposed settlement. He said there appeared to be some assets that had not been included in the division. Brian, according to Robert, had been polite but dismissive. He said all marital assets had been accounted for. Robert said he did not think that was accurate. He said he would be sending over additional documentation. The documentation arrived 2 days later. 147 pages, trust documents, corporate filings, asset valuations, financial statements, the trust my father had established, the company that had been quietly generating returns for 12 years. Accounts that had grown from $340 million to just over $800 million through careful management and market growth. Everything I had never told Jennifer about. Everything she had never asked about. Everything she had assumed did not exist because I drove a 2012 Honda and taught high school history. Robert called me that afternoon. He said Brian Morrison had called him 3 times. He said Jennifer had called Brian approximately 7 times. He said there was going to be an emergency meeting. I told him I would be there. Same conference room, different energy. Jennifer looked like she had not slept. Brian looked like a man who had just realized he had drastically miscalculated. They sat across from me and Robert, and the air was so tense it felt like something physical. Brian started talking about full disclosure requirements, about marital assets and community property, about Jennifer's entitlement to half of everything accumulated during the marriage. Robert listened patiently. Then he started talking about premarital trusts, about assets held separately, about careful legal structures designed specifically to remain outside of marital property, about the fact that the trust had been established before I had ever met Jennifer, about the fact that not $1 of trust money had ever entered our joint accounts or been used for marital expenses. Brian tried to argue. Commingling, lifestyle contributions, implied financial partnership. Robert dismantled every argument with the precision that comes from 30 years of estate law. The trust was airtight. The separation was absolute. Jennifer had no legal claim to any of it. What she was entitled to was exactly what had been outlined in the original settlement. The house, the car, the joint accounts, the life we had built on my teaching salary. The modest middle-class existence she had thought she was leaving. Jennifer did not say anything for a long time. Then she asked me why I had never told her. Her voice was quiet. Shocked, I looked at her across the table. I said I had wanted to build something real, something that was not about money or status, something based on who we actually were. I said I had thought that was what we had. She stared at me like I was a stranger. Like 9 years had evaporated and she was seeing me for the first time. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Jennifer got the house and half the joint accounts, exactly as originally proposed. I got equal custody of the girls. I set up education trusts for Emma and Sophie covering private school, college, graduate school, whatever they need. I paid Jennifer's legal fees because Robert said it was the decent thing to do. I did not pay spousal support because her attorney had tried to claim half of $800 million and the court had not been sympathetic. Jennifer moved Brian Morrison into the house 6 weeks after the divorce was final. I heard it from Emma, who mentioned it casually during a weekend visit. I did not react. I asked if she liked Brian. She said he was okay, but he talked about himself a lot. Sophie said Brian did not know how to make pancakes the right way like I did. I told her I would make pancakes every weekend they stayed with me. I still teach high school history. I still drive the 2012 Honda. I still live in a modest apartment in the same neighborhood. The girls stay with me every other week. We have dinner together, do homework, watch movies. I have not changed my life. I have not bought anything extravagant or moved into a mansion. I chose this life deliberately, and I am still choosing it. Jennifer calls sometimes, usually about logistics. Her voice is different now, careful, measured, a distance in it that was not there before. She is living with a man who makes $200,000 a year as a divorce attorney, and she is learning what it feels like to have chosen poorly. I am not cruel about it. I am polite, cooperative, focused on the girls. I do not mention the trust or the company or the $800 million she did not know existed. I do not need to. Brian Morrison still practices law in Portland. I looked him up once out of curiosity. He specializes in high-asset divorces. I almost laughed. The man who had tried to divide my modest teaching life in half had missed the largest asset division of his career. Because he had assumed I was exactly what I appeared to be, confident, dismissive, certain he understood the scope of what he was dealing with, he was wrong in a way that probably still keeps him up at night. At 47 years old, I have learned something about underestimation. It is the most powerful thing a person can have, because nobody sees it coming. Jennifer looked at me for 9 years and saw a high school teacher with a used car and a modest house. She never once asked if there was anything else. She never wondered why I was so content with so little. She assumed she understood everything there was to know. She thought my choices made me small. She thought they made me manageable. She thought they made me easy to leave. She had no idea those choices were the only thing standing between her and a life she could have shared if she had just asked the right questions. She spent 9 years married to one of the wealthiest men in Oregon, and she left him for a divorce attorney who makes a fraction of what I donate to charity every year. She walked away from $800 million because she thought she was walking away from $400,000. I do not feel victorious about it. I feel something quieter. I feel like a man who built something real and watched it collapse and realized the foundation had never been as solid as he believed. I feel like a father who is raising his daughters to ask questions and value substance over appearance. People will always underestimate the quiet ones, the modest ones, the ones who choose simplicity over status, and when they realize their mistake, it will already be too late. Jennifer realized it in a conference room with 147 pages spread across the table. Brian Morrison realized it when his confident settlement offer became worthless. They both learned the same thing at the same moment. The man they thought they understood completely was someone they had never really known at all. I still make pancakes for Sophie every other weekend. I still help Emma with her history homework. I still grade papers at my kitchen table. I still drive a car that is older than most of my students. I am still exactly who I have always been. The only difference is now everyone knows there was always more to the story. They just never bothered to ask. If this story hit something in you, like it, share it, and subscribe. This channel exists for the quiet ones, the ones who built something real and got underestimated for it. The ones who chose substance over status and got taken for granted because of it. Drop your city in the comments. And tell me, have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they had you completely figured out? Because I want to hear it, and so does everyone else watching this right now.